we did Home Alone, it was my job to do the trap sequences. So anytime, if you see Home Alone or Home Alone 2, anytime Kevin is torturing the two bad guys, those are all my sounds. So those were fun because we could just go hog wild and try anything. And then when the sequel came out, it was like, okay, we get to do it over again, but different. In that cassette era, I literally had a company with its own check, with a bank account and everything. I had logos made up, DiMuro tapes logos that were beautiful. I had stationery, I had business cards. So when I would write something, it was all part of this world of my music.
Welcome to another episode of In the Chair. Today we are in the chair with Dino DiMuro. He is a musician based in Palm Springs, California. In addition to his own performing career as a guitarist, and then more recently as an electronic music artist and beyond, he's worked sound for a number of Hollywood films, including Gladiator, Skyfall, Bourne Ultimatum. Just learned Jerry Maguire and Home Alone, so we'll talk to him about that. So please welcome in the chair, Dino DiMuro. Welcome. Thanks for joining. So Dino, when we first crossed paths, which is very recently, what caught my eye is I ran across you as a musician and heard music you created, but then as I kind of looked around for background, your career is not as a musician in bands. You've done sound in Hollywood. I'd love to hear a little bit about your background from band musician into sound work.
You want to know how I started in bands or movies or?
Yeah, I guess what got you into music, and then kind of how that path has progressed to today.
Gotcha. Okay, so I always loved tape recorders growing up. When I was 5 years old, the consumer machines you would get were these little 3-inch reel-to-reel machines, and cassettes started coming out around 1970. But before cassettes, I was actually making these little albums, I called them, on these little tape reels. And I do my own music, and then I would also tape theme songs off of TV, like Get Smart. I would tape the theme song, and then I would tape my family. And then I started doing cassettes. Like my best friend and I, my band partner, John, had a tape recorder, and I had a tape recorder. And it was just one of these little shoebox style cassette recorders. So it's like, okay, you have a record label, I have a record label, still doing that, still pretending. And here's our album. It's the one master tape. This is it. Here's my album. Here's another album. But then I started falling in love with movies and thinking maybe I could work in movies. So of course, I wanted to direct, I wanted to write. But when I got into the business, you started on a ladder where first you drove film reels around town, then you assisted an editor, then you did sound, then you would move up maybe to production. But when I hit sound, I was like, oh my God, because it was what I already loved doing at home. And I'm going, this little roll of sound film has horse footsteps on it. This has wind. And actually it paid really well. And I'm like, and then I realized I didn't like being around people that much. And I went, well, if I direct, I have to deal with all these people. I mean, I did direct a couple of student films and I did teach student filmmaking. But as far as work, I thought I'm in my own room, just like at home. I'm dealing with sound just like at home. So I kind of stuck in sound editing. And that's how that started.
Wow. Okay. No, I'm thinking of most musicians, the struggle is like, I want to be a rock star. And then you come across a job that pays well. It's like, I don't want to be a rock star that bad. I want to eat. But
Right.
if you can find something that does pay the bills that you love as well, that seems like a great spot.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I did leave out the fact that I was in bands in my high school years and, early after graduation. But once again, I'm not the kind of guy that loves sleeping on floors and not having showers. And so I would see my friends who were really pursuing that dream, and I go, oh God, that's really hard. So for movies, I ended up in a room, and for music, I ended up in a room. I didn't have, go out and play very much after that.
Yeah. Did you grow up in the same area in Southern California?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Hollywood. I lived a little bit in North Hollywood, but mostly was Hollywood. And interestingly, the house I grew up in came on the market for rent about 14 years ago. So my wife and my stepson and my kids and I moved back into my childhood home, and it was really almost unchanged. So I moved. My studio became my old bedroom, right where I had my desk, right where I had my tape recorders. And my best friend came over. He's like, "This is surreal, man." It's like, "Yes, we're back. Another 12 years in my old house." So it was great.
Oh my, nobody, I've never heard of that happening, actually.
It was wild. It was really amazing.
Uh, yeah, that's bizarre. Um, so you were kind of working your way up the Hollywood food chain and then just stopped at sound. So you get a gig or whatever. At that point, do you have much of a choice of what projects you work on? Like, how did you get your foot in the door to work on bigger? I mean, you've worked on some monster films.
Yeah.
How does that work? Is that just drinking coffee with the right people, or doing great work and being recognized, or a little of both?
Well, I'm sure you've heard this about, excuse me, I'm sure you've heard this about actors, which is, people say, well, why did they take that role? Why did they do that bad show? And they're like, I have to work. I have to have my health care. I have to work. And so it's the same with editors, especially when you're getting started. You basically got to take whatever you can get.
Mhm.
So what happened was I had taken a filmmaking class that was sponsored by the City by Cultural Affairs in Los Angeles. And the guy that taught the class was working at a small post-production house right up the street from my house. So he saw what I was doing with Super 8 and said, "Hey, why don't you come up and work with me?" And that was exciting because I could just drive up the street, and we ended up working all night on these little movies. Like one of the first movies we did was Motel Hell. I don't know if you ever heard of that. Kind
Oh,
of a weird
yeah,
movie.
no, that's a
Yeah.
cult classic.
Yeah. And so what happens is you work at a place and whatever they get, you work on. And it may be a low budget movie that they shot, or it may be a trailer. Like I did the trailer for Picnic at Hanging Rock, which turned out to be a big hit, a famous film. And so then the more you work, excuse me, the more you work, the more interesting things you get. Like I worked on a film called it ended up being called J Men Forever. It was by two guys from the Firesign Theater,
Mhm.
and the sound designer was Alan Splett, and he ended up doing all of David Lynch's movies. So
Wow.
that was exciting. So you meet more people, and then you gradually you work on better shows, but it really helps to go to a place that actually has a reputation. And so when I went to Sound Deluxe in Hollywood, they were building up a great reputation. And then so while I was there, they became maybe the biggest, if not one of the biggest sound places in Hollywood.
Uh,
So
yeah,
then you get good movies because you're there.
yeah. I don't know squat about Hollywood film sound, but when you said the name, it's like, I've seen that in the credits of every film I've ever seen.
Yeah, pretty much.
Uh,
Then they joined with Todd A.O., and that's a really famous name.
yeah, yeah. Do you have? I think anybody would love to hear, stories about some of the bigger films you've done, the run-ins with the directors, or maybe with the actors. I don't know how often you would come into contact with an actor, but certainly work with the director and different people in editing.
Yeah, surprisingly often, because what happens is I would send my work to the dub stage, and occasionally I would have to go there for whatever reason to fix something, or I don't know, or because I wanted to meet the talent. And like that day I met Ridley Scott, I was there because we were doing a temp dub on Gladiator, and it was actually the big chariot scene where they're fighting the guys on the chariots in the Coliseum. And so what you're doing is you're throwing in sounds on the spot as much as you can to kind of fill out the soundtrack to make it sound good so that he can then take it to the studio heads and go, here's the movie so far, occasionally for a test screening. So that's another reason to meet the talent. Then I would see people like Kevin Spacey or Kevin Costner walking the hallways, Lily Tomlin. And it's exciting. I'm a fan, so I was always trying to get autograph. I never could just approach them. I would say hello and be nice, but I had to have my supervisor say, Dino's a real fan here. He loves your stuff. And I do have a funny story about Cameron Crowe.
Oh yeah.
When I loved Fast Times at Ridgemont High, but mainly I loved reading his articles in Rolling Stone. I don't know how old you are, but at my age, he was literally my age, hanging out with Zeppelin and Allman Brothers and all those guys. And so we would read his articles and go, we were so jealous of him, getting to hang out with these guys.
Well, and it was him that it was either the direct or indirect inspiration for Almost Famous.
Yeah, that was his life story.
Yeah.
So that's what this story is about. So I ended up working on Jerry Maguire. What was the next? Almost Famous, I think, came after that. But so then I was working on this movie Vanilla Sky, which had Tom Cruise again. And so Cameron literally came to my editing room. And so I showed him what I did. And then I finally got to meet him and say, Cameron, I was trying to meet you on Jerry Maguire. And what I was going to say to you was that I loved reading your stuff in Rolling Stone. We were we were jealous of you, but we were so proud that someone our age was doing that. And I go, but then you made Almost Famous, and now any jerk can come up and go, hey, you're the dude from Rolling Stone, man. And he thought that was funny. But what really cracked me up is I had on my wall, I had autographs because I would get these autographs from people. And then I go, well, I may as well put them up. They're not doing any good in my drawer. So he came in, and I had nearly died once from meningitis. And my friend had met Renee Zellweger and got her to sign a picture for me. So Cameron, and he had discovered her for Jerry Maguire. So he comes in and he goes, you have Renee on your wall. And I said, yes, I do. And he goes, but you have Renee on your wall. And I wanted to say, Cameron, she's done a few movies since it wasn't just you that, she's done other things now. It was very funny that that's what he keyed on.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. Do you have an example of maybe something you added to a film that you're just, I think I have no clue, but it seems like part of your job would to subtly be including sound that fills out the whole spectrum of what the audience experiences. But do you have some examples of something you put in a film that was like, that's a home run? That's a bottom of the ninth grand slam in this world. Or do you try not to do that?
Yeah, I'm sure that there's probably a few that I'm not going to remember. Well, for example, when we did Home Alone, it was my job to do the trap sequences. So anytime, if you see Home Alone or Home Alone 2, anytime Kevin is torturing the two bad guys, those are all my sounds. So those were fun because we could just go hog wild and try anything. And then when the sequel came out, it was like, okay, we get to do it over again, but different. So those two movies, I'm very proud because I can say that to anybody. Either you saw the movie growing up, or they have kids who've seen the movie, so they go Home Alone. Oh my God! So that made me proud. Mm-hmm. But then, just on a more subtle level, Ridley Scott really loved sound, and he played up sound. Like a lot of directors, you do a lot of work and then they just turn it down and they don't use it, and that's their choice, and that's okay. But Ridley would try anything. He would listen to anything. So on Black Hawk Down, 9/11 had just happened, and a lot of people were like canceling their movies. But for whatever reason, the studio went, well, now we're going to rush this movie out instead of sit on it. So our schedule went from like 3 months to 1 month to do Black Hawk Down.
Wow.
So in the opening scenes in Mogadishu, the town scenes, I would just try things like I would put steam or chains or bells. Like they didn't have anything to do with, they were nothing historically accurate or accurate as far as I knew. But I just looked at, Ridley's visuals are so beautiful. So I would just go, Yeah, I'll bet there's steam over there. I'll bet there's chains from some cart. I'll bet there's bells here. And he put it all in. So when I see those scenes, I'm going, yeah, he went for it. He took all my stuff that makes no real sense. Like, well, what's that chain? I don't know. It's just there. But he loved it. And then for Gladiator, there was a famous story, and I can't really take credit. I was kind of just there, but it's become my story. Uh,
That's fair.
the I had to do a lot of the crowds in Gladiator, and they're hard to do. But at some point, somebody cut a cheerleaders going, push him back, harder, harder, and put him in the crowd scene as a joke for Ridley. So they played it, and everybody laughed, and then they go, okay, moving on. But then the mixer couldn't find the fader that it was on. So once again, push him back, push him back. So after the third time, Ridley goes, I'm starting to like it. All right, we're starting to like that sound. So there's something about the sound. I mean, that just shows how open he was to sound, that he was even considering leaving the cheerleaders in Gladiator.
Wow. Wow. Um, so much of what you just said is very powerful to me because I saw each of those films in the theater, maybe on the day they came out.
Mm-hmm.
I remember going to see Gladiator day it came out, and it was a very large theater in Times Square. Maybe it was between musical runs or something. I don't know why there was such a huge theater, um, but the sound was amazing. And yeah, I just remember, the rumble of the wagon wheels and just all those sorts of things. It was a very um, sonically immersive movie, and that was, I mean, it accompanied the visuals so well. I'm not just trying to kiss your butt, but I remember watching that film more than a lot of big blockbuster adventure movies that all have loud sound. Uh,
Yeah.
but the textures were really impressive.
No, that's the thing about someone like Ridley is if you're a fan, then you love the movie just as much as anyone else would, even though like just as another example, I did 2 episodes of Sopranos, and it was my big episode was called Whitecaps, which is considered one of the best episodes, where Tony and his wife have a fight and break up and leave the house. And to this, and I hadn't watched it to that point. So when I worked on that episode, I went, well, now I got to go back and catch up, and then I became a super fan. So to this day, I'll go, it's time to watch Sopranos, and I'll start over at the beginning, and I'll be in that world and loving it, and then suddenly I start feeling this feels familiar, and I go, oh my god, this is my work. I completely forget that I would ever worked on it until the scenes come up. And then I go, oh yeah, I did that. I did the shooting, I did the car, I did that, and so that's an example of if you love the show or the work, you get completely overwhelmed by it
Wow.
to the extent that you forget you worked on it.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, I could actually listen to you tell stories all day, and I have so many questions. Um, if we get to this at the end, I might start asking more questions. But I want to talk about your original music also. I think for any musician, I mean, I have musician friends. I'm a musician, and I have, I do web development, and I have musician friends who are real estate agents, and you know, very rarely do you have a friend that's full-time musician paying every bill by that. Um, but you created original music and you haven't stopped. Uh,
Right.
what I'd love to hear a little bit about your original projects, um, and even now talk about your new album. Uh, that I mean, obviously, there's still a fire for you to create original music and not just do film sound.
Right. Well, I did retire, so that opened up a lot of time. And my first wife, who sadly passed away, was not, let's say, not supportive of the music,
Mhm.
uh, to put it mildly. And my second wife Sharon, is like nothing but supportive. So that combined with retiring, it's like I just want to do it every day, and I feel bad because she'll come home tired. She's still working. She comes home tired, And I'm just going, oh my God, I did this thing where I combined the guitar with the drums. And she's kind of looking at me like, yeah, he's in his own little world there. And if she starts to fall asleep early, I go, I'm going to go downstairs and work on some music. And I feel bad because it's like I'm so into it. And I try to temper, my enthusiasm a little bit. But she was instrumental in letting me press these records because these records are like one-offs. They're not like you order 200 or 500. They're really expensive,
Yeah.
and it was really great of her to say, "Go ahead and do this because this has been your dream for years." But anyway, I think I started at the end there.
No, that's interesting. One of my bands did a short run of handmade like lathe cut records, and I mean we could only produce maybe 10 or 20. They were so expensive to produce.
Yeah.
They were picture discs. So yeah, I mean 10 of our fans have these, and all the band members bought our own. But yeah, the smaller run you do, the higher the cost.
Yeah.
Um, so let's go ahead and talk about the new record. Fill It Up with Regular is the album.
Can I show you?
Yeah, yeah, let's see it. I love the retro cover. Excellent.
Nice and shiny.
Excellent. Uh, Very nice, very nice. Um, I've listened to it, but I'm gonna listen to it again very differently the next time. I'm gonna listen very intently, not just for the songs and the sound, but how after hearing you talk about the intricacies of sound, now I expect all sorts of hidden Easter eggs or something in the album. But yeah,
Well,
talk a little bit about the album.
I'm sorry. It was years before, because when I started, um, can I go back to? I'm sorry. Can I go back to where I really started with
Oh yeah.
music? So after those cassettes that I told you about, there was a whole movement of people that when TIAC brought out these 4-track cassette recorders, you remember those?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So that was a revolution because people suddenly could overdub themselves on these little cassettes. And but for me, my dream was to get this A3440 4-track reel to reel deck, which is actually it's somewhere around here. I don't use it anymore, but that was always my dream because it was I had tried one at my film school, and I'm like, oh, and they were over $1,000 way back in 1975, which was just like an incredible amount of money. But eventually, I saved up and I got one. So when everybody was doing these cassettes, I was doing 4-track reel to reel and then bouncing onto a 2-track reel to reel, and then like kind of the way the Beatles did it, sort of, where they would bounce to another 4-track and then bounce back. So I would get up to 10 or 12 tracks doing it that way. Then I would mix down to cassette and duplicate those cassettes and mail them out.
Hmm. Hmm.
So everybody told me that, wow, your quality is great. Well, it's because they were on reel to reel, like usually going pretty, at a high speed, and I would razor edit because I knew how to edit, so I would razor edit everything.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And then I discovered there was a network of people that traded music cassettes over the mail. Like I made an album, of course they called them albums. I'll trade you yours for mine. Here's a list of other people that do the same thing. And then I started finding zines like Auction, Sound Choice, Electronic Cottage, Gajube, that had reviews of cassettes, which was like they actually review my album. It was incredible. It was amazing. And it didn't back then. It was free, so it was like you just had to wait and mail in your information and stuff. Then I became a reviewer for Option magazine for a while. So then I met more people that way. So that was like the cassette era. Then when recordable CDs came in, that was a whole different thing where you could duplicate CDs and mail those out. And then the quality was like absolutely beautiful. So I had these two different eras, and I kind of call this era. What happened was my work became at the end of my career, my work became so complicated. Like I worked on the Narcos cable series, And I did like all like 80% of the sound on that. So for me, every episode was like one of my albums. It took all the creativity that I normally would put into music and I put it on the show. And then when I retired, I'm like, okay, now I'm back into music full time. And but when I came back, everything changed. These zines were kind of gone. Everything was online. Everything kind of has a monetary facet to it now. And what's the other thing about that? Oh, kind of albums were kind of passe. It's like people had gone to singles or tracks instead of albums. Because I made 3 CDs. One of them was a double. I'm like, okay, here's my CD, but like I look around and nobody really wanted CDs. They just wanted tracks. I mean, occasionally you'd find a place that would review an album, but it was really difficult. It was not like it was in the old days for me. So I kind of shifted my focus to tracks, and now I kind of like doing tracks because I realized you get stuff out there faster, but you also concentrate on that track and make it as good as it can be. Whereas on the album, maybe you let something go a little bit, maybe something wasn't quite as good as it could have been, and then you're in a rush, like, God, this album's taken 6 months. I got to get this out, And so now it's like you get the track out, people you give you your feedback, and eventually you can put them together and make an album. Maybe add some new stuff to it.
Yeah, yeah. No, the process has definitely changed over the years. I feel like in a lot of the 70s and 80s, the problem would be, every band would have 2 or 3 great songs, or maybe just one. So you'd get an album where several of the songs sounded amazing, and then you'd get the filler tracks of the
Right.
song wasn't as good, and they didn't even add a tambourine. It's just you 4 guys are on the track, let's press it. But today it is different. It is very much a single uh, universe out there, and maybe you compile them to an album, maybe you don't. So many people just listen to things on shuffle and playlists that it's very different.
Yeah, that's the thing is that creatively, I love making that. But if you only have 2 or 3 people that are going to sit down and start it from the beginning and listen to everything you did in context, I mean, it's crazy to do that much work for 3 people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Uh,
Not Taylor Swift, so
no, no, her fans will, yeah, start
okay,
at the beginning, listen to the end, and then hit repeat.
yes,
That's there's an article there somewhere of Taylor Swift might be reviving the album single-handedly.
yeah, I did notice that. Well, she certainly tied up all the pressing plans. All the indie people were like, "I got to wait 3 months because Taylor's got all of her records getting pressed."
Great, great, great. Um, if it's all right, I told you before we started visiting that I want you to be I could call you a guinea pig, but really what I want to do is introduce a new segment to my interviews, and that's 5 quick questions. So let's do 5 questions now. Uh,
Okay.
don't think too deeply about them. Just kind of there's no wrong answer. But what we just talked about leads great right into this. So today, you decide I want to listen to music. What what platform or what medium do you go to if you're like, I want to put some music on? What is that?
If I'm really going to concentrate, it would be vinyl.
Hmm.
But I do a lot of driving even now. So then that's streaming. And when my iPhone, once my iPhone gets updated again, I'll be back to like my own little library on iPhone. So
All right.
if it's an album I really like, or I want, in fact, indie artist just sent me his double vinyl record the other day. So I put that on the turntable, and it was great, and I really concentrated and loved it. So that's generally what I'll do.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's stick with that platform. Question number 2 of 5 on vinyl. When you decide I want to put on some music, there's a nice collection there behind you. What are a couple of your go-to artists?
Uh, Captain Beefheart is my favorite, and I can play any of his records endless amount of times. After that, I could say Zappa, but some of his music I kind of got tired of, and it's weird. All the '70s bands I love, like the Who and Hendrix and people like that, I kind of overplayed them. I think because they're on classic rock radio, and I played them a million times, and so there's not a lot of discovery there. So if it's not Beefheart, if it's not somebody that I know sending me a record, I because I also I sell used records. So I'll find used records. I'll find a record in the dollar bin that I remember seeing as a kid advertised, and I'll go, I always wondered what this sounded like. So then I'll put something I've never heard on the turntable, but that I kind of knew about all these years, but didn't really know the music. And so that's exciting because generally they turn out really nice. Like, and then maybe I'll end up buying everything by that artist. Like I went through a phase of the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band because I knew the single, a couple of singles, but they had a triple album that was a collection of bits from all their records, and it was an incredible amount of different sounding things.
Wow.
And so I actually went and saw them live recently. So that's what I end up doing is I'll find a band that I kind of know of, but I always wanted to know more.
Huh. That's a great way to approach life, much less your musical choice. All right, let's go with question three. Whether it be your sound work or original music work, what's one of the highlights of your music career in your life? Like, man, that was a good day at the office.
Well, musically, in the cassette era, I made a cassette called Gower Street, which was based on that house I told you about where I lived in and then moved back to. And it was the first cassette. It was just before I started making CDs. So it was the first and only time I had a cassette professionally duplicated. And that was for that year. I copied 500 and I pretty much got all of those out there. I'd say like 80% of those got to people. And was getting great reviews, and it felt like that was a level of fame for that. If you're an indie artist, that was like as famous. I mean, I didn't think it was as famous as I was going to be, but it was really a peak for me. And unfortunately, right after that, my son was born, and I love my son. That's nothing unfortunate about that, but that was my wife's chance to say, no, you're done with that now. And that's when I made my first CD, like 500 CDs. And I'm like, wait, I just made this CD. And literally 400 CDs went under the bed, and I reused the covers to this day because that ended my streak as far as that. So because that was a heady moment. That was like, I really felt like people knew who I was, and I was getting, a lot of orders and letters, and that was great. So yeah, for music, that was a big moment.
Oh, that's great. Do you have any copies of that cassette in your home to this day? You do? Yeah.
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 You mean left over from selling them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a few, and then I have a bunch of covers that if I ever wanted to dub it.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, like a lot of these old albums, some of these quarter-inch masters just didn't last. They're like no high end left on them. Some are fine, some are not. So that was one where the master. What I ended up doing for Bandcamp is I had a really bad copy from the master that I uploaded, but then my cousin gave me his collection of my tapes, just temporarily, and so I literally dubbed from his pristine cassette onto Bandcamp. It sounded better than my master.
Wow. Wow. Oh, there's a testimony for the quality of cassettes. They get a bad rap, I think.
Oh, I totally think. I don't understand people say they sound bad because when Chrome cassettes came out and metal, people I knew would get their record, tape it immediately to cassette, and then save the record and play the tape.
Yeah.
They sounded great to me. If you had a good receiver and good speakers and or you had good car system, tape sounded awesome.
Yeah. No, I'm a big cassette fan. All right, I'm going to power through the last two questions. Question four, you mentioned you're retired, but you just put out an album. So I wanted to ask about a career goal of yours. Maybe it's one that you already achieved, or maybe it's something that you're still shooting for. As a musician, what has been a goal of yours?
Well, vinyl was definitely a goal.
Just to be to create something that was on vinyl?
To actually make a vinyl record that I could sell and send out to people. And I mean, this is kind of cheating because it's, there's only like 20 of them. So it's not like the 200 or 500 I'd always dreamed about. But I always heard stories of people that did that. They end up in their living room, not going anywhere, in boxes and stuff. So I
Okay.
didn't want that to happen. That already happened with cassettes. Um, so musically, I guess at this point, it'd be nice to increase my listeners. But a funny thing is happening, and I'm not like that era when I told you when I came back and started making CDs again, um, and I realized the whole world had changed. Like so, with each subsequent CD, I tried a new thing. I would read up on these things you get online about how to promote your music. So I go, oh, okay. There's Submit Hub. There's this website. There's certain things you can do, and each one would help a little bit. But you have to keep doing that. It's like you can't just go, okay, this one I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And I have to say, it's a little scary, but I'm getting more content with making the music and less worried about promoting. And I don't know where that's going to lead. That's going to be like this, I think. And I don't want to get too far down. Like meeting you was a good. Oh, this is a new thing, so maybe that's going to help. But it is getting harder to keep promoting and doing the music because the music is so fulfilling on its own.
That is, this is my first five questions segment, but that is a question I usually ask people is how do you balance the creative element versus the promotional element? And some people pass it all along to a friend or a spouse or a manager, and some artists revel in the publicizing the work as much as creating it. Yeah, there's a lot of mediums there.
And
Um,
the problem is Twitter kind of turned into X, and X is not like Twitter was. It's very controversial and very hard to kind of stay there. Um,
Yeah,
and so much.
the party really got shut down when the when the grown-ups when the adult Twitter.
So yeah, there was Twitter, and there was what's the other ones? Well, there's Blue Sky now, and Blue Sky and Threads are kind of new. But I remember I met so many people on Twitter that are still my friends, that are still my contacts, and it just seemed like it was a much more vibrant, bustling site. But then when Elon came in, like people just like half the room left. So that's kind of not really working like it used to.
Yeah, I do feel like there hasn't been a lot of people left Twitter to go to Blue Sky, um, but it wasn't everybody. And yeah, a lot of people left Twitter and went to Threads. So yeah, there's not really a go-to community place right now. That's overwhelming. Uh, Real quick, last question in the five questions is a younger person comes up to you and says, "I'm a musician. I want to. I don't. Maybe it's make a band, be in a band, or maybe it's I want to break into the Hollywood sound scene. You're a little bit different because you have these two careers in one. What advice would you give to, a teenager or someone in their early 20s? Like, man, I want to do that. What do I do?
I do get asked that sometimes. And it's hard because you got to remember when I got in the business, I was working on equipment that Charlie Chaplin would have recognized. It was a little different, but not really. He would have come in and go, "That's a moviola, that's a splicing block. I know what all this stuff is." So when I got in, it was really like you hustled, you drove, you delivered, you did this, you did that. And now I think it's more of, and I did go to film school for a short time, but I think it's more of a film school online world as and YouTube making YouTube videos. So I am so far out of the mainstream as far as how people get anywhere. The one thing I would say, which I'm sure is still true, is learn to edit as much as you can on your own and make like a show reel of your stuff. So you can say, okay, I don't know your system that you're on, but this is what I did with my free Pro Tools or my free program at home. I think one of the first digital editing things I did was on my Mac Classic. It was like a little program that came with the Mac, and I brought it to work because we were starting to go digital. And I go, look, I did a little digital thing, and it was true. It was digital. It was just really primitive, but that showed them that I was willing to like get my hands dirty with the computers and the new technology. So that's what I would, that's all what I always used to do is try to create my own movies and stuff. And that's what happened. I would show my movie to someone that works somewhere and they'd go, oh, well, maybe you'd be good on this project that I have. If you could do that with these tools, like what really bothers me when people say they don't have the tools. Well, I don't have the tools. I don't have the program. I don't have the work with whatever you have, maximize whatever you have, and then your talent will shine through that. And then people go, oh, well, you did that with this. You can do it with the good stuff too.
You hit on some amazingly important things. I get a lot of submissions from a lot of artists, and so I get to see, what do you have, and get that, and that varies so wildly. Sometimes it's every social platform has thousands of followers and tons of great content. That's rare, but sometimes it's nearly nothing. It's like, well, the name of my project is this, and I have this one demo, and that's it. Like, there's no words to describe it. There's no pitch. There's no, oh, do you have a photo? Like, no, I don't really have a photo. So I think what you're saying is whatever you are doing, put together examples of it
Yeah.
so that it can be conveyed, so that someone can say, I heard this artist. They sounded kind of like this and this, and they're going to play next week. Just have several things to say about yourself or represent yourself. That's uh, no, I think that spans uh, industries for whatever you're doing. If you're a vacuum salesman, do that.
You're making me feel guilty because in that cassette era, I literally had a company with its own check, with a bank account and everything. I had logos made up, DiMuro tapes logos that were beautiful. I had stationery, I had business cards. So when I would write something, it was all part of this world of my music. And now, as part of this thing where I'm only really interested in the music, like when you said send a photo, I have this thing I send out where it's me as a young guy and me as an old guy, and I'm like, well, I'll use that one. And so I kind of feel guilty now that I'm not really doing the picture thing as much as I should be probably. Or
that just goes to say that communicating with others is an important element too. It just kind of puts a mirror on you and puts a mirror on me of, well, what am I doing well? What could I do better? I mean, you can always do that. Taylor Swift, I'm sure, is like, all right, well, the next album, how can we do this better? It's
yeah,
just, something. Uh, this has been an amazing conversation, Dino. I want to, just before we kind of wrap it up, circle back to the new album, and can you give people who have never heard of you before kind of a pitch? What is this album like? What can they expect when they order their vinyl of Fill It Up with Regular?
oh boy, oh boy. Well, there's for this album. See, this is hard because I have so many. So if you don't follow an artist and then they go, well, this is a new direction, like, well, that doesn't mean anything to me. I don't know who you are. So, but you know, for this one, I wanted to put some guitar solos in there because people seem to like my guitar playing. I'm not great, but I do have my own style. So I did put two guitar solos and a jam track on there. So there's that for people that like that. Then I do this kind of quasi classical, folky, proggy thing where it's like 3 minute instrumentals that just go all over the place. Like a lot of people say Zappa, but it's not exactly like Zappa. It's more, it's kind of quirky and kind of more classical maybe than rock, but also has rock in it. So then there's those kind of tracks.
Okay.
And then, I'm sorry, I have to look at it. Oh yeah, and then there's like Captain Beefheart. I always try to get a Beefheart style track in there because he's not easy. You can like do rock and even Zappa type stuff fairly easily off the top of your head if you try. But Beefheart is like you really have to know what he did to kind of do something that sounds like him.
Huh.
And so it took me years. So I always try to get one in there that's like anyone that knows Beefheart, which seems to be many fewer people nowadays, will get what I'm doing here. So there's like those three elements in there.
That's amazing. All right. So if any of that piques your interest, dinodemuro1.bandcamp.com. dinodemuro1.bandcamp.com. All the sound is there. Dino, thank you so much for taking time. This has been a wonderful conversation. I've enjoyed visiting with you.
Yeah, it's been fun. Thank you.